Hello and welcome to another episode of the lunchtime stream of streams of the Rulebook read along of the daily, or at least week daily stream. Hold on a second, what's happening here? Oh, there we go. This was kind of interesting, or maybe not, I suppose, depending how you want to look at it. A couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I was reached out to interview author John McGuire in connection with his, I think, running Kickstarter for a role-playing game adventure called Point Nemo. Seems to be, or at least the back of the tin describes kind of 80s, or inspired by 80s action sci-fi, which seems pretty cool. I'm always up to talking about people about pretty much anything. So I said, sure. We set a date. Turns out it's going to be tomorrow. So you'll see that come out tomorrow. And when I looked at the Point Nemo Kickstarter to get an idea of what it was about, it referenced that the system that it uses is called 3-2-1 Action. I had not heard of this system before, so I thought I might be nice to educate myself on it before I talk to one of the authors of said system and their adventure. Hence, today, I thought, let's take a look at it. It might be interesting. It's presumably going to be a bit different than the normal OSR-ish, kind of D&D-ish rule books that I read, but I have a variety of tastes. I like to see different things. Maybe you guys will find it interesting. Maybe not, I suppose. Let me go ahead and pull it up. I kind of thought maybe it would be some kind of Powered by the Apocalypse related thing, but I don't believe it is. I think it is. It's entirely its own thing. Let's get the rules up there. Here we go. So it's called 3-2-1 Action. You can download it completely free. I think I put a link in the show notes. I believe their website, which it's not really a website, really. They have a URL, 321action.com. And if you go there, it pretty much goes to a link tree that just has some simple links. One of them is, I believe, is to this rulebook, which is just on Dropbox. You don't even have to register on something like DriveThru to grab a hold of it. You can literally just go get it. I think from what I understand, there was one adventure that they've already done for this system. I don't recall the name. I believe Point Nemo builds on that adventure, or maybe as a sequel. You don't need to have played the first adventure to appreciate Point Nemo, but you can play them as, I guess, an adventure. What do they call them now? An adventure path or a series of modules. In any case, we're going through this, right, just blind, just taking a look. I mean, literally blind. I know nothing about this. It's called 3-2-1 Action by Geo Collazo and John McGuire. I will be talking to John McGuire in person tomorrow. It's all about the game and how you play it. Quoting from Lemmy. There's some kind of fish. What's that? I don't know. It's got a fish man at the bottom. Let's see. Anything else we need to know? I don't think so. All right. So usually I skip over some of the preface and things like that when we're, dealing with a kind of your yield OSR. But for this, I feel like it's more important than it might be otherwise, because I really don't know anything about it. Maybe you folks know something about it, but let's hear what they have to say. So here's the preface. Have you ever watched a scene in your favorite action movie and wondered how you could make it work in an RPG? You ever wanted to drop a Macho Man elbow on some Martians? Or fire a rocket launcher while jumping off a skyscraper? Now you can. 3-2-1 Action makes it simple with rules that run off a single D10. Just let the game runner know what you want to do and make it so with just one roll. 3-2-1 Action is for everybody, and it's the perfect system for cinematic storytelling, whether it's 80s action, crime drama, haunts, heists, mysteries, sci-fi space operas, or weird westerns. 3-2-1 Action has you covered. 3-2-1 Action is all about letting the game runner, much like a TV showrunner, set the scene and the players declaring what they want to do and then calling for action. All challenges, damages, and rolls are done on a single D10, and bonuses and penalties are either a 3, a 2, or a 1. There is minimal math, which means maximum fun. The rule set also leaves plenty of room for wild ideas and harebrained schemes, which are not only allowed, but welcomed. Anything is possible in 3, 2, 1, action. Practicing my my movie voiceover voice. So there we go. So it uses a single D10. The GM they are calling a game runner. It seems like it is definitely following that kind of story game sort of vibe. Maybe even kind of fourth wall breaking. I guess we'll see with the idea of calling scenes like you're shooting a movie and saying action, you know, like the guy with the clapboard does when they're about to film something, or the director maybe would call. I don't know if that's just to put it in terms here, or if they're actually going to have that in some of the game mechanics. We will see. But we definitely get an idea of the kinds of genres this game is built for. 80s action high on the list, but then also crime dramas, heists, mysteries. So it's covering a lot of ground. How to play. There are 2 roles in 3, 2, 1 action. The game runner runs the show. It's their job to set the scene, call action when the game starts, and control all the monsters, traps, and puzzles. Then there are the players, aka everybody else at the table. Your players, through creativity and dice rolling, will navigate the various challenges and puzzles. We'll get further into what exactly these roles require in the upcoming sections. All right. Hey, Ewan Smith. Nice to see you. Says, is the cycling color grade on the feed an intentional choice? It gives a cyberpunk vibe. Yeah, I'm just trying it out. I have one of these lights I sometimes use as a fill light, and it can do cycling colors. So sometimes I get annoyed by the virtual green screen and how it gets kind of choppy, especially around wearing glasses and things, because it sees these gaps and doesn't know what to do with them. But I wanted something a little bit more than just a flat background. So I decided just to take my fill light, sort of turn it askew, and turn the colors on. And see how it works. We'll see if it's too distracting to me or to you. Just something a little different. Thought I'd try it. None nothing. Hey, none nothing. Says, is that what a TV showrunner does? I've heard that term, never knew what it meant. Strange what you learn for RPGs. Yeah, basically, they pretty much, yes. They are kind of in charge for making stuff happen on the show. They get called a showrunner. So yeah, in this way, they're equating the game master with the showrunner, calling them a game runner. It's cute. And look at that. As if on cue, we get to the game runner section. The game is directed by the game runner. They will set each scene and call for action when the game starts. They keep saying that. I wonder if we literally expected to call action, or is that just kind of a funny way of just being in the sort of movie making and saying, hey, we start the game, we're calling action. I'm curious, because I kind of think it would be fun, though maybe you get old after a while. The game runner would set up a scene and then, call action multiple times during a session. They describe the setting, control all monsters, traps, and NPCs, the non-player characters. It's a role that requires keeping a mental tally of quite a few moving parts. The basic mechanics of the game are determined by a 10-sided die. Tasks. Most actions the players might try are rolled against one of the 6 character stats, ranging from 2, the lowest stat possible, to 9, the highest stat possible. The character stat being challenged must be met or rolled under to successfully complete any task. When it comes to actions, always remember the basic rule of 3, 2, 1. The lower the roll, the better the outcome. We'll get into each of the individual stats later on in the player section. Most characters can accomplish simple tasks very easily. For example, a chef can make an omelet with little effort. For mundane tasks done during a daily routine, there's no need to roll a challenge. But when it comes time for the game runner to challenge the players, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Oh, yes. I'm thinking there might be a lot of these plays on 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we get an idea. We're going to get some stats. We don't know what they are yet, but you're going to have a stat. The range of stats you could possibly have, 2 to 9, everything's roll under. This is with a D10. So the lowest possibility to complete something before we take it to modifiers would be 20%, which would be, right, rolling. Well, I guess it would be 10% if you have 2. Because I presume 20% because you got to roll under or meet. So yeah, so if you have a 2, you got to get a 2 or 1. So 20% to 90% basically is the range. Again, before we get into any modifiers. and you want to roll low, okay. And I would like that note, though. I don't know if it's just maybe it's going to get a little bit lost, but that same concept that we talk about a lot in different things. But you don't need to have people roll challenges for every little thing. If you're a chef, you can make an omelet. You do not need to roll any dice, unless you're going to use those dice for something specific. It's assumed that somebody who is an expert at something can do things that are pretty easy within their expertise. If I can make an omelet, a chef can certainly make an omelet without having to roll. But I almost would like if they would call it out a little bit more, but we'll see what the tone of the rest of the game is maybe first. All right, so here we have 1, 2, 3, which I guess is telling us about the modifiers for different challenge levels. We would use 1 for a light challenge, something a character could accomplish with a little effort. Following the previous example of a chef, they could make an egg in a nice kitchen with no problem, but an omelet made on a skillet around a campfire might be a little harder. 2, for a medium challenge, something a character would have some degree of difficulty doing. Now let's see that chef do it while holding a flashlight in their mouth during a windstorm. And then 3, for a hard challenge, a monumental task. Chances are they might fail on their best day. All the previous examples with an angry bear ravaging the camp. All right, so we got our 1, 2s, and 3s. So easy, pretty much let it go. Fairly easy 1, medium 2, hard 3. Seems like it'd be pretty easy to remember. When the challenge is assigned by the game runner, the player adds it to their roll, thereby making it harder to roll under their stat. 1, 2, 3 might not seem much, but therein lies the beauty of the system, because the stats are based on a 2 to 9 scale. Even a +1 can make or break an action. Right. So 3 represents a 30% harder than normal difficulty, 2, 20%, 1, 10%. The game runner can also do the opposite when applicable and give players a boost of -1, -2, or -3, which is subtracted from their rolls to either help move the story along or as a reward when a player does something particularly awesome, creative, or clever. Does this mean that you are adjudicating that after they roll or before? Maybe it doesn't matter. Right. Normally, I don't know why I think you might do it afterwards, but that point about, hey, move the story along, I could see that happening afterwards. Like, oh, you say, oh, this is a medium challenge. The chef needs to make this omelet while holding a flashlight in their mouth during a windstorm, while they're trying to make this thing on a rough skillet in a campfire. And you roll, and then all of a sudden, it's going to come up short. So you go, oh. But of course, on the other hand, if you really need the game to move along, maybe that's when you don't have them roll for it. Figuring out how to assign challenge difficulty can be a little tricky for game runners, but one rule can make it easier. All the player needs to do is fill the plot hole in 2 sentences. This is the most principal rule of 3-2-1 action system, It's especially handy because the one thing a game runner can be certain of is that players will always do the unexpected. When players do something completely out of left field, the game runner's natural impulse might be to keep the game from going off the rails at all costs, or at least try to find ways the player's action couldn't happen at all. This is sometimes instinctual, but a game runner should always try to encourage creativity. Boldness should be rewarded, and zany ideas might have more merit than you'd expect. All right, so this is going to be interesting. I don't know, I'm thirsty today, so I apologize for drinking more water than usual. Okay. Let's say your player wants to do something extraordinary but out of character for their role. For example, your gruff heavy gunner needs to delicately flambe a bananas Foster because he knows it's the enemy general's favorite food. They like their chef stuff. This is the kind of gameplay that we want to encourage because it will ramp up the excitement in the game and makes for a unique experience. With that being said, we still want actions to make a semblance of sense. The good news is that most plot holes can be filled with a quick explanation. The great news is that the players will have the opportunity to do just that. Fill the plot hole in 2 sentences. When we watch movies or TV shows, we'll often see a character stumble across a motorcycle and ride it like Steve McQueen in The Great Escape, or use a power loader like Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, or just about anything Tom Cruise does in any of his movies. Moments like these are usually punctuated with a supporting character asking, "How'd you learn to dance like that?" answered by the main character saying, "My mom used to date Bob Fosse. I heard tap dancing all night." If a player wants to try something out of character or extreme, the game runner will ask them to fill the plot hole in 2 sentences and will assign a bonus or penalty to their roll based on the answer. In our Bananas Foster example, your heavy gunner might say, "Grandma always had Julia Child on in the kitchen. I miss my grandma." All right. So I like this. This is something that I could see pulling out and using in my game. I think this is as a general thing you could say would work really well in kind of any game. So your character wants to do something and it doesn't match anything, right? How does this heavy gunner? We could do the same thing. If I was going to put this in just, OSR D&D type terms, we've got this barbarian character and suddenly they have to do something very delicate. They have to do flambe a Bananas Foster. How'd they do that? And then the barbarian can look at their background and stuff, and in 2 sentences, if they can make it make sense, if they can connect up their backstory or some wrinkle of their backstory to Bananas Foster, then you can give them some kind of bonus or penalty. Now, the one thing that I think that people clearly, obviously, depending on their style, it's something that gets talked about a lot with, not a lot, but fairly often 5th edition, right, is this pleasing the GM. Okay, so you're going to make me tell a story, and if the GM likes it, then I'll get a bonus. If he doesn't like it, I get a penalty. So I'm really just playing for the GM's, whims. Like, maybe you could do something differently. Maybe you could make it a group thing, and maybe that rule might not work for your table if your players really take offense to that sort of thing. But I like the concept of being able to reach outside yourself and then being prompted to actually come up with, well, how does this work? Instead of just saying, you're a barbarian, you don't know anything about Bananas Foster. No, you are allowing an opportunity for the player to create more backstory, make those connections that you can mark down, then becomes part of their character. This is certainly good if you're like me and you either as a player don't love coming up with really complicated, complex backstories, or as a GM, when I don't really require my players to come up with crazy, amazing, complex backstories. This is a way that they can just start to fill things out in the game when these things come up. How did you get from there to here? How did you come from a child working in the acid mines, and then you become a thief, to cooking Bananas Foster? Oh, well, the master of the mines, taught all the kids to cook because that was his passion, and I was on the dessert team. All right, great. And then you can write that stuff down and you can kind of help build that backstory over time, but it's not just building it to build it. It has mechanical, input or influence or importance in the game. So I like that. A perfectly fine answer is worthy of a -1. Creative answer could garner a -2. And if a skill set and the corresponding answer are really super creative and evokes roaring laughter, then by all means give them a -3. This small bit of role-playing will have a big impact not only on the game, but may also give the players the ability to further flesh out their characters. If their explanation is significant enough to add depth to their character, encourage them to update the info on their character sheet. I would say encourage them to keep a tally of it anyway, even if it's not super significant. How a turn works. One thing that always perplexed me in most role-playing games is how little action actually occurs on the player's turn, or on a player's turn. In most games, you can move and take an action, but that's it. One move, one action. There is a rigid order to the turn in which, more often than not, some players towards the back of the line have to wait a really long time to get their moment to shine. It's also overly complicated and usually requires someone to be in charge of the initiative order. Where's the fun in that? In 3, 2, 1, action. We like to keep the fun flowing for everybody. Instead of complicated initiative-based systems, we encourage everybody to work together and keep the turn order simple. All right, sounds good. Let's see how they're doing it. So they have this new turn order. Number 1, the turn begins by the game runner reading the flavor text. Number 2, the game runner asks the players what they would like to do. In almost every scenario, the players get to go first. They could simply go around the table, or they could have a de facto leader go first, or a mixture of the two. It's really up to the personal preference of the game runner and the players. Some players like to wait to wait to see what other people do first, and others like to jump right in. Once decided, the game runner will devise an order of actions and describe it to the players. So right now, this is basically, I don't know, how are other people playing their games? Isn't that how it mostly happens? The GM reads or says some kind of description and then asks what the players want to do. After asking the players what to do, then monsters, creatures, or NPCs go next. That's number 3. And then number 4, the players go again. This repetition will make up the bulk of the combat in the game. When new monsters, creatures, or NPCs enter combat, they always do so on their turn. I don't know, this doesn't seem much different. I suppose it's really just sounds like group initiative. Players go, monsters go, players go, monsters go, kind of like that. And in this case, the players during their turn can decide who to go first, or they could have a caller. Seems like what the de facto leader is. Or maybe it's not a caller, so it's just saying the de facto leader goes first. Yeah, it's just group initiative. So I don't see what's, this is so amazingly different. But I suppose if someone reading this hadn't done group initiative before, then maybe it would seem new to them. The only exceptions to players going first in turn order are ambush and traps. On rare occasions, the monster, creature, or NPC will get the drop on the party and act first. Then you would proceed to step 2 and allow the players to react. All right, that makes sense. How combat works. Our combat system, 3-2-1 combat, is extremely simple. Oh, there's a little typo there. Tell the game runner what you are planning to do, and your attack will always hit. That's it. How much damage you'll do is based on the modifier assigned to your weapon and the roll of a d10, or multiple d10s based on the type of weapon used. Well, that is certainly easy. Hey, Don Rossavelli, welcome. This is 3-2-1 action. We're into the combat section. Everything is very simple here. This is certainly fitting the bill as kind of a cinematic story game. So you're automatically going to do damage. It's just about how much, which is going to be some number based on a modifier and a damage type, which are both on the weapon. I don't think they've said how many hit points or anything or how they're doing damage. But here we have an example. For example, you're using the handgun, damage -3, and you roll a 10, you'll have done 7 damage. If you roll a 3, then you do 0 damage. Anything under 0 is a 0. Well, that's interesting, because I'd assume that they'd all be positive modifiers. But having a negative modifier is interesting, because essentially you are having a miss. It's just, you're rolling essentially, you can look at it like you're rolling the attack and your damage at the same time. I'm assuming there are some weapons out there that are just going to auto hit. And that might be appropriate for some things. And then others, by using a modifier, a negative modifier on the damage type, you were essentially saying about the handgun, you have a 70% chance of hitting because you get 3 or less. It's being zeroed out. Seems fairly clever in that kind of game style. It's even more abstracted than, say, D&D combat. But if you want to punch, kick, fire a gun, or do a sweet Macho Man elbow drop from the top of a crate onto your opponent, just say it out loud and make it so. I'll show you my wrestling style. Hey, pour a little out for the Macho Man. He was great. Nothing is off the table here, so get weird, get wild, and don't be afraid of taking chances. We don't know what elbows from the top rope or punches and kicks would do. I wonder if that will be defined somewhere. I'm really just more curious. See, game runner notes. Unless otherwise noted in the weapon description, each weapon allows 2 attacks per each player's turn or 1 special attack per player's turn. You can also target multiple creatures, monsters, or NPCs on your turn, so you'll be able to run the combat your way. Wow, 2 attacks for each player's turn. So that handgun, you can basically fire 2 shots, or you can get 2 kicks, 2 punches. Macho madness. Oh yeah. Yeah, come on. There's not enough macho madness in the world these days. I mean, we've got plenty of madness. I'm talking about macho madness. In 3-2-1, we did something a little different than most other tabletop role-playing games. We don't use health points, hit points, life points, or any of those traditional references to a player's state of well-being. Okay? We use luck points as a reference to determine if a character lives or dies. The thought behind this is twofold. First, a character literally dies when their luck runs out. And second, a person's state of well-being is put in danger relative to the risk they take. All right, so we don't have any hit points. We only have luck points. Well, let's see. We're about to see how luck points work. Each player's character starts with 20 plus 1d10 base luck points. This is their starting luck point total. When a player's character takes damage, it is deducted from that luck point total. Once the player runs out of luck, i.e. their luck points reach 0, they die. All right, and hopefully my P's aren't blowing up. The plosives aren't blowing up through the mic. So there's a lot of P sounds here. Luck can also be used to adjust game runner and player rolls. A player can expend as many luck points as they want to adjust rolls in whichever direction, plus or minus, as they see fit. This could be a stat roll, like an action check, for example, or an ammo roll, like adjusting how many shotgun shells you find. To use luck points, the player announces to the game runner how many they would like to expend after they roll. There's no maximum to the amount of luck points a player can use. The only exception to this rule is a player cannot use luck points to adjust weapon damage or to directly assist another player. They can indirectly assist them, but only through their own actions. All right, so you got these luck points, and you can use them for a few different things in the game mechanically, but not combat in terms of weapon damage, and you can't throw them to another player to add onto their roll. You'd have to use your own character's actions, and you could luck point those. Luck points can be earned at the end of the episode, gained through med kits or other healing techniques, or awarded by the game runner at any moment for being clever or entertaining. There is no maximum to the amount of luck points a player can have. A conservative player could keep storing them up encounter after encounter and never expend one. It is also possible for a player to expend all their remaining luck points, resulting in their own death, making a heroic sacrifice to help their friends survive. Well, one would hope so. Player death. Let's face it, sometimes you eat the bar, and sometimes the bar eats you. When it's time to meet your maker, you'll know it's because your luck points will drop to 0. Normally, this would be a bummer if it happens mid-game, but don't fret. While the battle rages on, you can pick another pre-gen character or roll one up from scratch in the time it takes for the turn to come back around to you. This will work until the very last encounter. At that point, you're playing for keeps. For the game runner, this could easily be explained as another survivor washes up on a different part of the island, and here they are. Most plot holes can be filled in 2 sentences, and looky here, we did it in 1. Yep, this is true. Rewarding the players. The end of episode wrap-up. At the end of each episode, players can roll 1d10 to replenish luck points. Whoops. They may always re-roll a 1. This should be added to their tally, and there's no maximum for luck points. Some people are just that lucky. They may also use first aid kits and perform battlefield medicine to boost their luck points, though I would recommend doing this after they've rolled their 4 luck points. End of the episode awards ceremony. At the end of each gaming session, during the downtime before people leave to go home, it's nice to go over some of the highlights of the game and reminisce about the fun time everyone had. Or, because it's already late, you just want to run for the doors. Or you have to. That's the perfect time to have the end of episode awards ceremony. Most of these can be voted on by the entire group, giving out awards for Best Comedy, +1 luck points, Best Action Sequence, +2 luck points, Line of the Night, +3 luck points. Feel free to add to these categories with other ideas like Best Dramatic Moment, etc. Yeah, that's a nice touch. How movement works. One thing is, some of the way they've organized this, it's kind of weird. So we go through combat, whatever, movement, then we're into movement. I'm not sure that it doesn't not make sense to me, but at the same time, I don't know if it's the best organization, the way it's been kind of bumping around. We haven't even seen the players' stats yet. So it's kind of interesting how they've moved these around. I'm sure there was thought put into it, but it's just a interesting layout of concepts. How movement works. A lot of what takes place in 3-2-1 action It's going to be done in the theater of the mind, so there won't be any counting squares or hexes. That being said, each encounter should have a map with basic distances. Each player's character can move roughly 40 feet per turn. The limitation is based on common sense rather than hard and fast rules. Remember, story is greater than physics. So if a character spots a guard snoozing 50 feet away and they want to ninja their way to attack, let them. That's a nice touch. Nothing says replace dead PCs within a combat round. That is definitely a particular choice. It is, right? So I think it works okay in this type of game because it's clearly dealing in sort of the idea that you're kind of in a movie or in really a TV show. So you can kind of get in that mindset and then maybe more easily accept that in the middle of the dungeon, somebody just dies and then, hey, somebody else just happened to walk in on the scene in that moment. You can play it up for comedy. I have a feeling this is kind of a lighter style game. It seems like the mood the game is trying to evoke is pretty light and entertaining and not super serious. We're not looking at trying to be hyper realistic. This is more like, hey, it's fun. We're in the A team, so to speak. So sure, something terrible happens to BA. We could totally see on a show like the A team, somebody would come in the next scene, and all of a sudden they would find a new BA in the next cell or in the next room or burst in the door. And you can use that fill in the plot hole thing. They can explain how they got from wherever and heard the noise or opened the door. So it's not something that I would use in my OSR game. I would want to take more care with that. But in this kind of game, I think you can just roll with it, right? And I think that's kind of what they're asking is, hey, appreciate what this game's trying to be, which is be like your favorite 80s sci-fi kind of action movie, just sort of fun, not too serious, not too sensical. And just run with it, right? Lean into it. Ewan Smith says, I like the idea of handing out luck points in place of inspiration. Yep, it's something that I like. I will say I do like the luck points. It's something I've been trying to figure out if I like, which is this idea of I've been going over was if I could use hit points for multiple different things as kind of more of a complete engine of things and not just your damage. And this is doing it something similar to kind of what I've been pondering doing. So yeah, it's interesting to read it. And I do appreciate it. And it fits with the trope, right? Yeah. When you die, you ran out of luck. Well, here you die when you run out of luck. All right. Now we get to the player. Each player character has 6 main stats that must be determined at the beginning of the game. When a character describes what they would like to do in a scene, the game runner assigns a role, and whatever negative modifiers applies to one of these player stats. For example, a game runner would suggest rolling an action check if the player wants to throw a basketball into a hoop, or a brains check if they want to hack into a computer. These stat categories are broad to allow the game runner's interpretation of what would be the best stat to roll for each unique situation. Sometimes players will come up with something not covered by these stats, which is where the game runner's discretion would come into play. Use your best judgment and choose whichever stat check is most appropriate. All right, so we're going to get to some 6 main stats. I'm guessing it's going to be mental, some physical. So some mental, some physical, and some survival. All right. So of the physical and mental stats, these stats are for the player influencing the world around them. We have action. Action is the general all-purpose movement-based stat. It encompasses things like running, hiding, swimming, and climbing. All of these things fall under this stat. A rule of thumb when determining if the action stat is applicable is to keep in mind if it's something that takes a character from point A to point B. But shooting a basketball, does that take a character from point A to point B? Not sure. Let's see what the other ones say. Brains. Brains covers both book smarts and street smarts, knowledge and intuition. It's a catch-all that covers any sort of logic, reason, problem solving, reading and comprehension, searching for clues, and math. Anything that requires active brain power to solve. Brawn. Brawn covers pure physical strength. This stat covers heavy lifting and physical activity, including everything from shouldering open doors to wrenching open jars of pickles. to carrying an injured buddy off the battlefield. Try to think of it as a stat that doesn't require much mobility to accomplish, just pure potential energy. And then charm, trying to get your point across. Are you persuasive? Whether you are a derelict or diplomat, this is the stat you'll roll. So these seem fairly, obvious. The one thing that's interesting is and I only bring this up because they brought it up. Oh, hey, shooting a basketball would be your action stat. Then I read through these and I don't know if it's your action stat. It makes sense as your action stat since it seems to be more, if action is the more kind of moving stat, which would be sort of your dex, then sure. But technically, shooting a basketball does not really take a character from point A or to point B. I mean, unless it's a layup, you could be standing stock still and you're shooting a basketball. So action doesn't seem to fit. And then brawn, it's not just potential energy. It's not about throwing it as hard as possible, just firing it off into space. So I don't know if brawn fits. So it's kind of interesting they bring that up. The other thing I would say, which is just more interesting, is you have brains that covers book smarts and street smarts. Unfortunately, what it does is it puts together two of tropes that can oftentimes be two separate tropes that oftentimes exist in the kind of, what I'm thinking at least, of inspirational movies and things, which is one, the book smart scientist, and then the streetwise street urchin. Because here they're sharing one stat. So it makes the cloistered scientist, with their glasses on and has their head in the books, would be rolling the same things as the little a gutter snipe that knows all about the underworld and things like that. Now you could just put bonuses or penalties on different things. So when the gutter snipe is in the lab, -3, and when the book scientist is in the the speakeasy or trying to find a speakeasy, they're whatever penalties, I guess I should say. So +3 on all those. But it is interesting. It would have been nice maybe if you could find these ways to that the stats, I guess, really allowed you to create all these different kind of movie-ish tropes without having to share and kind of different stats. But that might just be me. Nothing says rule of thumb. Would it be obvious? Would it obviously be called Dex in a different game? Then it's action. Yeah, that seems like something like that would have been better, right? Because yes, it is definitely not just moving. It's kind of the hand-eye coordination, right? Moving and agility. Or just say you're trying to do a specific action. I don't know. Yeah, but probably yes. If it's Dex, it's action would be the most, or at least someone like me who's used to reading other kinds of role-playing games. Maybe for somebody completely new, if I handed this to my wife, maybe she wouldn't even think twice. She would get it. It's only for us folks who are constantly confused by other older role-playing games that we would have an issue with that. All right, we have, those are 4 of the 6 stats. We have 2 more, what are called survival stats. These stats are for the world influencing the player. Cool is for mental fortitude. Can you keep your head about you when the sky is falling? How about slowly walking through a field of zombies covered in zombie guts? Solely facing down a barbarian horde, or getting in front of your 3rd grade class to give a book report for a book you totally didn't read. Keeping your cool can help you stay on task and add a bonus to your roll, or in the inverse, give you a penalty for losing it. So it looks like these are, I suppose we look at these as essentially saving throws. I actually kind of like saving throws recast as just another stat. It makes sense. It makes sense. And I think I like that more, as saying, hey, you have some stats that are you influencing the world, and then some stats that are triggered when the world is trying to influence you. I do think that's kind of cool. And then you've got guts. Guts is for intestinal fortitude and endurance, and it covers how well the player can handle physical stress and strain. Radiation, snake bites, zombie bites, poisoning, eating a bad burrito, all these could lead to a guts check. 3 failed guts checks will result in an ongoing penalty to your other stats. So the one thing they don't have is that kind of dodge out of the way stat. I guess that would just be action. But it's interesting because you think of that sort of dodge saving throw as that, hey, that quick get out of the way. There isn't one here. There's just sort of intestinal fortitude and mental fortitude. Let's see. Oh, I hate when I do that. Don Rossavelli says, this system reminds me of WEG Ghostbusters game from way back. I've never read that one, but I've heard really good things about it. So I would think that would be a compliment to folks because I've heard nothing but good things about WEG Ghostbusters, though I've never played it or read it. It's actually on sort of my wish list / bucket list of systems I'd like to give a read. Ooh, after a fourth failed guts check, your character dies. Failed guts checks can be reversed in two ways. One is by having a character use battlefield medicine or a first aid kit to reverse one failed guts check. The second is by using 5 luck points to reverse each failed guts check. So that's cool. So you have to keep track of those gut checks. Interesting. Now we're at building a character. Some characters may want to create their own characters. Or sorry, some players. Yeah, some characters want to character their own characters. No, some players may want to create their own characters. Here are some quick rules to do so. Character creation starts with 6 D10 rolls. The results of these rolls are then assigned to the stat you want them to correspond with based on the way you want to play your character, factoring in any pluses or minuses based on the character's role, but we'll explain that in a bit. No stat can be lower than 2 or higher than 9 because there should always be a chance for absolute success and utter failure. When rolling your character, a roll of 10 will drop to a 9 and a roll of 1 will bump up to 2. All right, so I was wondering how they were going to get from D10 rolls to 9 to 2, but there you have it. You're just going to sort of compress the range a touch. So you get that 2 to 9 range. Game runners might also want to offer first-time players the option to re-roll ones when they're rolling up their character. Seasoned players might want to keep ones and try the game on hard mode. If you have never rolled a character before, consider using the standard array and adding your character's role-specific plus/minus to it. Their standard array is 3, 5, 5, 6, 6, and 8. We recommend that you always put a higher roll in your action stat as it will be the one most used throughout the game. Once you have rolled your stats, choose the character's background, doctor, firefighter, soldier, etc., and add a +1 to a stat. The game runner will apply a -1 to another stat. They cannot subtract from the same stat you added to, and this will keep everyone honest. The rules above still apply, so a +/-1 can't be used to raise a stat above 9, nor lower a stat below 2. Nice try, though. So that's interesting. So you will pick a background, and you'll say, I'm a doctor, but maybe I'm going to have a doctor that's super action doctor, and I'm going to add my +1 to action or whatever. Then you'll hand over to the game runner, and the game runner will take some other stat and subtract 1 to it. So that's kind of intriguing. They have some sample rolls. These are definitely kind of obvious ones, right? A doctor, you get +1 to brains, -1 to charm. A driver gets +1 to cool, -1 to guts. A lawyer gets +1 to brains, but -1 to brawn. And these are just samples. They're not really mean to be binding in any way. Lawyers and scientists essentially get the same bonus and penalties here. And then soldiers +1 to action, -1 to charm. A backstory in 3 sentences. Part of the reason why RPGs seem so daunting to many first-time players is that there is a certain unspoken expectation for a character to have a lavish backstory. Not in my game. Not here. In 3, 2, 1, action. All character backgrounds start with just 3 sentences. 1 based on their role, 1 based on their motivations, and 1 based on what brought them to the adventure. That's it. Take Captain Teresa Gale, for example. A true woman of the sea, she's been in love with the ocean ever since she was a small child. Always curious about the unknown, she's been sailing since she was a teen and runs a tight ship. Growing tired of the familiar waterways of the Northeast, Captain Gale, quote-unquote, retired and left New England in search of new adventures and oceans unmet in other parts of the world. So there are 3 concepts here. 1, Captain Gale has been sailing since she was a teen. 2, she's a ship's captain. 3, she's retired and in search of adventure. The rest of the characterization will come out through the fill the plot hole in 2 sentences mechanic and through riffing with other characters. One of the reasons Netflix is so successful at getting you to give a random movie a shot is that they keep their description short and simple. That's all you really need. So I really agree with this. I might say I would say I would want to tweak number 3. And this is something I could see applying to my games, or if I was going to run another game. Right, 1 based on the role. I like the other one, the motivations. Though I don't know, though even their example, the motivations are a bit unclear. 1, the role is she's a captain. That's her role. Or ship's captain, maybe to be specific. What is her motivations? Doesn't really have one. Sailing since she was a teen is not a motivation. That is really just a background. She's a ship's captain, not a motivation. She's retired and in search of adventure isn't really a motivation either. So it's kind of interesting that their example doesn't really maybe fulfill the things they're actually asking for. To me, a motivation is I want to, I want to find my wife's killer. I want to rid the world of, I don't know. Something like that. It's kind of like, why do you want to adventure, right? Ask the question, why are you doing things? Like, why are you a hero? Why are you a villain, right? I need to do this. Why? She doesn't have that kind of, I need to do this. Why, right? Spider-Man, his motivation is he wants to prevent other people losing their family like he did. Right? He wants that's his motivation. He needs to prevent tragedies like the one that he experienced when he let his uncle, or he let that criminal go, and then the criminal kills his uncle. So he feels this burning need he needs to save people, right? Bruce Wayne needs to redeem Gotham City. That's why he does the things he does. As to the third one, rather than say what brought them to the adventure, I would want to say what brought them to the party, right? What made them part of this group that's doing adventurous stuff? To use kind of the example, maybe the A-team, they're all in the military together. They all ended up together, right? And so they were in the same unit, and so they have that bond, right? That to me is probably more important than what brought them to a specific adventure. In their case, they don't even give a specific adventure reason. They kind of just give this is kind of what she is now, but not really a great reason. But I do appreciate the sentiment of, hey, boil it down to just three things. Turn those 3 things. You can turn them into just a quick paragraph. Everything else we're going to fill in on the fly. Inventory. In almost any action movie, the hero/heroine is almost always traveling light. In the spirit of this movie trope, you may only carry a max of 4 items or 4 slots with you at any time. A standard array could be a handgun, a combat knife, a shotgun, and a tool or med kit. Ammunition is always counted as part of the weapon to which it belongs. For example, the magazine to the handgun and the handgun are 1 item. A bow and its arrows are 1 item. A bag filled with multiple pipe bombs is 1 item, although it's a very dangerous one, and so forth. Some heavy weapons or other heavy items, such as a bomb disposal unit, can count as 2 items. For instance, a grenade launcher will take up 2 item slots. These items will have this exception in their description. So we have a very simple inventory system, but one where you got to be light, which I kind of like, especially for this kind of thing, right? It'd be interesting if they had some kind of, I don't know, I was going to say McGuire, but that's not really the right word. It's sort of I don't really love that movie, but in the first Jumanji remake, where the guy, what was he was like a weapons man or something, his role, and it was just basically he could just dig stuff out of his pack. And I think in this kind of game, that having kind of a bag of holding or a rucksack of holding kind of thing with just all kinds of doodads in there that you could pull up would be a good use. I think that's, again, comes from something like Blades in the Dark, where you can kind of fill in, sort of like filling in plot holes. You can fill in some little detail of how the thing that you need ended up in your backpack when you decide to pick that up. Might be kind of fun. Weapons. Weapons are divided into 2 groups. Melee weapons require you getting up close and personal. Ranged weapons usually do greater damage, but characters have to count their bullets. And in weapons terminology, we have damage, DMG for damage, MB for movement, round, ammunition, and SA for special attack. Melee, fists, kicks, have a movement of 40. So I guess this is how much you can move if you're going to use it, and a damage of -6. So remember, you're not rolling to hit. You're only rolling damage, and then you're subtracting. If there's a negative modifier, you are subtracting from that total. Positive, you're adding to it. If the total falls below 0, it does no damage. So in this case, you're going to have to roll pretty high to do any kind of damage with just your fists and kicks. And you can do 2 attacks on your turn, or 1 special attack. So with melee, special attack is a knockout blow. With a successful action check to sneak up on a surprised enemy, you get 2 attacks. If you can deal at least half the enemy's luck points with this attack, you can effectively knock the target out. Normally does not work on robots or ghosts. Well, maybe ghosts. Maybe robots too. So kind of interesting, but given how many luck points you tend to have, and I don't know how many luck points NPCs will have, that seems kind of tough, because you're going to have to start with 20 plus 1d10 luck points. That's a hard ask to get to 10. Well, I guess you have 2 attacks, but at -6, the best you can do is, 4 and 4, which would be 8. But maybe they're going to show, when they show what some NPCs are like, maybe they'll have markedly less luck points than you're starting than a character, which I suppose would make sense. Brass knuckles. It's basically a +1 in terms of damage. So instead of being -6, you put some brass knuckles over your knuckles and then punch somebody, your damage -5. Then you have a special attack, which is it adds +1 to brawn checks involving breaking things. Oh, and a +1 to charisma for intimidating people. I like it. So I don't think there's a really reason to go through these. Linkian says, NPCs don't tend to have a lot of luck in movies. Well, this is also true. But we're getting, I'm not going to read all these. Brass knuckles was kind of interesting. But, you get knives, machetes, samurai swords, handguns, shotguns, compound bows, rifles, etc., etc. Flamethrowers. We get ranged heavy weapons, flamethrowers, grenade launchers, which have a bunch of different special attacks based on the type of round. Grenades and sniper rifles. Makeshift or improvised weapons, bar stool, pool cue, broken bottles. Sometimes players want to grab something handy or for dramatic effect, and the game runner should let them. Damage and special attacks can be made up on the fly and is totally based on the game runner's discretion. Have fun with it. Maybe a beer bottle could restore a luck point or 2 if the character swigs it before breaking it over an enemy's head, or a bar stool could keep an attacker from melee on a successful hit. Yeah, that's interesting. Armor. You should call it plot armor, wouldn't that make sense? Armor works by granting the person wearing it temporary luck points. These points will be expended first before the player's luck points, and once they're depleted, the item is useless. Also, unless noted, each piece of armor takes up 1 item slot. So you have flak jackets. Oh, picture of your sweetheart back home. Uncle Jack's lucky Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card. Fallen Friends dog tags. Kevin's lucky rabbit's foot. That's cute. I like that. And I like that it doesn't all have to be physical armor. And again, in this type of game, I could see that once you've run out of luck points with the flak jacket, there's always that moment, either after a combat or maybe in the middle of combat, when the guy's bulletproof vest gets all shot up, so they just kind of take it off, right? So that could just, hey, your flak jacket's ruined, or something happens and they see that they were saved, but then saying, saved, and then the bullet was stopped from piercing their heart, and when they look, it was like, I don't know, it was like the piece of like their wallet with the picture of their sweetheart in it. They'll take it out and they'll see like, oh, look, the picture saved me, but the bullet's embedded in the picture, essentially making it useless. So you could have a lot of fun with those kinds of things. Nothing says, I like that the picture of family is armor. Yes, I like that a lot. I could see, that's another thing I could see tweaking and putting into my, taking out and putting into other games. Having, I don't know if I want to call them like little charms or tokens, maybe a nice word, tokens to represent that kind of stuff that armors you, but isn't really armor, and you can have some and lose them and gain them again. Could be interesting. Rolling for ammo. Because most weapons in the game will be found through exploring, chances are they will always be low on ammo. When finding ammo in the game, players will roll 1d10 to see just how little they find. Exceptions to this are specialized weapons like the flamethrower, which will always have their ammo/restrictions listed in their descriptions. For all other weapons, see the chart below, and I guess you're just going to roll a die and then check for ammo. So hand grenades, you got to roll a 10 to find some. That's kind of cool. So different, you could just roll for different weapons, or you could roll. Someone's like, hey man, are there any hand grenades out here? You roll d10, depending on what you find. Yes, yay, or nay. Content warnings, lines, veils, and the X. An adventuring party is only good if everybody's having a good time. A great way to make sure everybody's having fun is to make sure each person feels comfortable before the game even starts. This is where content warnings, lines, and veils come into play. A content warning system can be used at the beginning of every session to set player expectations and allow you, the game runner, to make sure your team knows what they are getting themselves into. For example, Rocket to Russia features action movie violence, blood, guts, and gore, starting a session by explaining, hey buddies, just FYI, there's a little bit of chainsaw body violence in today's story. Just want to let you know. Can let everybody be on the same page about what the story includes. Some players may be into chainsaw body violence, while others might not be, and it's totally cool if they aren't. Others may be cool with only some of these things, but not everything. You should always give everyone an opportunity to draw their lines. Lines are just what they sound like, lines in the sand that should not be crossed. Some examples of this could be animal abuse, child death and endangerment, and sexual assault. The players should never be subjected to something that would make them feel uncomfortable or unsafe, so you should always take a moment to go around the table and see what kind of lines the players wouldn't like to cross. Also, be sure to let them know that it's okay if they don't want to share their lines publicly. Be sure to give everyone a way to message you offline about them before you start. Once the players declare what their lines are, it is your job to make sure not to cross them. An example of this might be a player saying, I'm cool with whatever, but if the dog dies, I'm going to be super mad. Next, ask the players for their veils. Veils are things that can be alluded to but not dwelled upon. For instance, if a player dislikes spiders and you enter a room with a massive spider-infested web, you can bring it into view and then quickly pull away from it. No reason to linger on something that might upset a player. Even after laying out lines and veils, a situation might arise where something unforeseen in the game might pop up and cause a player discomfort or distress. The best planning in the world might miss something. It's a valid player reaction, and just because everyone is in the middle of the session doesn't mean they can't call attention to something. This is where the X comes into play. Players should always have the option to throw up an X, be it a hand signal, text in a chat, physical card, or whatever was pre-established during setup. X means stop, do not pass go, do not collect $200, and don't make a big deal about it. Just pull away from that scene immediately and move on. Trust me when I say that taking a few minutes at the beginning of your session to make sure everybody is comfortable can almost guarantee your players will still be smiling at the end of it and looking forward to the next one. Lines and veils were originally developed by Ron Edwards for a piece called Sex and Sorcery. The X card was originally developed by John Stavropoulos. Read more about it here, and then we have a link to that if you're interested. It's tinyurl.com/x-card-rpg. Don Rossavelli says, just so you know, Todd, I'm okay with chainsaws. Me? My veil would be sex scenes in my RPG. If you want to allude to your barbarian getting it on with a barmaid or whatever, great. But I don't need to go there. Now we get 3, 2, 1, quick play, quick start rules. Do I need to read through the quick start rules since we just went through all the rules? Seems like it's kind of a one-pager that basically lays out stuff we've already gone through, so probably don't need to go through that again, but it's cool to have. And then we get to the end, and then we get to the back of the book with the, I guess, I always forget to kind of go, because these are sort of, if my conceit of these rulebook read-alongs is that we're in the bookstore, or we're in the game shop, and we pull a random hardcover or softcover off the shelf and start flipping through it. Probably the back of the book should be the thing I should go to and read up front. But here it is. Have you ever watched a scene in your favorite action movie and wondered how you could make it work in an RPG? Oh, they actually repeat that in the book, so I don't need to read it. That was 3, 2, 1, action. So if you like this, I will, let me exit out. If you like this book, if it seemed intriguing to you, know that I will be talking to the author tomorrow on this very stream. Should be at the usual 1 o'clock starting time. They will be here, so we can chat about that. There is a Kickstarter that they're coming. That's kind of what caused them to reach out to me. If you've seen my other interviews and such, I'm sort of a wandering go wherever the conversation takes us, but I'm sure we will touch on the Kickstarter. And I was just going to pull it up, so just check it out really quick. I don't know why. I thought it would come up right away in my browser. Instead, I'm getting, I guess there is a real place or something called Point Nemo, because, let's see, is this it? Okay, I found it. So I will pull this up. All right, Point Nemo on Kickstarter. Let's just take a look at this really quickly, because I am at the bottom/top of the hour. Oh, it's giving me the blank thing again. Oh, you're killing me. Why are you doing that? All right, so I'm just going to have to kind of read it, but there's the link. So I'll just really quick give the story and consider this kind of a prelude to tomorrow's interview. Point Nemo. The story is a documentary film crew lost at sea and shipwrecked on a mysterious island through monsters and intrigue. A billionaire who knows more than he seems and his bodyguards struggling to keep him alive. An evil lurking in the jungle, stalking them in a deadly game. This is Point Nemo. So there's kind of the story, and then more description. This is a 100-plus page black and white book played using the 3-2-1 action RPG rule set. This adventure is a love letter to all the great 80s action sci-fi adventures you grew up watching, where a band of misfit survivors are thrown into a harsh new environment and must persevere while something sinister lurks in the shadows. All right. So that is kind of a teaser, we'll call it, for tomorrow. I don't know how much we'll get into this. I actually don't know. According to his bio here on Kickstarter, John McGuire is a podcast producer, co-host of My Tai Happy Hour, Casual Interactions, the Vintage RPG podcast, and the host of Expert Minutes. He's got a lot going on. And he's the co-creator of 3-2-1 Action. So there's going to be should be a lot of interesting things. I will have to check out his other podcasts and stuff as well. But this was 3-2-1 Action. Let me know what you think. Don Rossavelli says, very mysterious island themed H.G. Wells. Yeah, I get a sense of, I feel a little Jurassic Park in there maybe, or some iteration. Wells and kind of that journey to the centers of the earth, and those kind of, maybe some, all kinds of misfit type island stuff, right? Island of Dr. Moreau, all kinds of stuff. So look forward to more of this tomorrow, but let me know. I'm going to call it quits in a second. So before you leave, if you could give it a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it. Leave the stream. If you're not subscribed and you're in here, hey, get subscribed, and then you'll get a little notification when tomorrow's chat with the author of RPG or 3-2-1 Action RPG shows up in here. Other than that, have a great rest of your day or night whenever you're watching or listening to this. Game on. Talk to you later.